push till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll go. Finding life along the way, melodies we haven't played. No, I don't want no rest. Echoing around these walls, fighting to create a song. I don't wanna miss a beat. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on we'll And we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, and on hold me.
How's everyone doing? Sorry. It's really laggy. Hold on. VS Code's trying to update. So you're going to get a laggy experience for just a second. All right. Well, regardless, I hope everyone had a great week. We're starting to get really close to the exam date. So this will be actually my last the Road to DevNet Expert streams for on Thursdays, like the weekly stream that I normally have. This will be the last one. My next stream I'm planning to do is not this Saturday, but next Saturday, which I believe is, hold on, let me just pull up the calendar. The 16th, April 16th, and that will be kind of a grand finale. So I'm planning to do a longer stream that day, Probably aiming for 4 to 5 hours. It's going to apply not every single topic, but a lot of topics that are found in the DevNet expert exam list or exam topic list. And I'm gonna try. My plan is I'll release or I'll create an agenda or like a requirements doc that will outline some of the technologies that we'll hit. And my goal is to create like a Discord space or something like that, maybe, that those that are interested or have questions, it'll kind of be like a phone in whenever you want. I'll keep it as an open Discord space. And, you can just jump in the room, ask questions. It's going to be more collaborative. So, I'm doing a lot in the background. So that's kind of why I wanted to do a collaborative approach, is for allow you guys, the viewers, and those that have been with me this, 4 months or so that I've been streaming, to, jump in if you want and ask questions, and I'll go over specific things. Blues, how are you doing? I see you're in the chat. How am I doing? Almost ready for the expert lab. Yeah, I'm going to be as ready as I can get. I'm kind of just this past week, pretty much since it hit about the month mark, because this past week was 4 weeks until the exam. I'm kind of just to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm going to lock it in for the next 3 to 4 weeks, but I'm kind of just ready. I'm ready to experience. I mean, there's only so much in your head that you can try to picture is going to be on the exam, or like what questions. So I'm kind of just ready. I'm just ready to try it out, see what it's like. A lot of the webinars and things that I've attended, everything's pointed to, hey, it's going to be a realistic, the practicality of the exam is going to be something hopefully you see like on the job or in real life. And so I'm kind of banking on that as well, that it's not going to be, trivia, right? Like, there's, if you've taken a Cisco exam before in the past, we've all had that one, couple questions that were more trivia than practical. So I'm hoping, if it leans on the practical side, I'm feeling pretty confident. And so, yeah, we'll see how it goes. Matt's here as well. Matt says you're gonna kill it. Yeah, I hope so. I really, dude. If I leave there, leave Richardson May 3rd with, a pass for this exam, it'll be unbelievable, to be honest with you. I've put in a lot of time, on stream, learning in public, and then also off stream. It's just, between labbing and reading, there's just so much. And I think I've said it before, whenever you're trying to learn these topics and you don't have there's nothing out there because of how new the exam is. There's nothing out there that says, hey, this is how, there's no structured training yet. So a lot of it's like, for example, last week was Ansible. I read through a lot of Ansible documentation and I labbed up what I've found as practical. But I know I'm going to probably run into something on the exam that may be something I didn't lab up as much as I should have. But that's kind of the risk that you take, especially when it's a new exam, expert level exam. So, we'll kind of see how it goes. So I'm definitely, open-minded with it. Thanks again for you guys joining the chat. And if you're watching the stream on YouTube, please feel free. This is a very collaborative session. Yes, I'm going to be diving through some technical stuff, but it's also for anyone interested in network automation to have that platform to where you feel comfortable asking those questions. Matt asks, if you get it, what's next? A vacation. Yeah, I'm honestly going to be sitting, if I get it, I'm just taking a break for a long time. I don't have any aspirations for, kind of going any further with other certifications for right now. So yeah, taking a break. Okay. So if you're here, I'm sure you're like, okay, enough talking. Let's get back to business here. So this week was actually really fun. And the topics were software development, CI/CD. Mostly it's my focus this week has been CI/CD. Software development, I pretty much, I do that. That's kind of my day job. A lot of it is maintaining an application. So I do a lot of research and hands-on coding in my day job. So software development just is more natural, and it's one of those things that you can read through the different principles of software development. Um, Dry and the solid principles, right? But until you actually do it and like you see where the faults are at, I think that's really where you learn. So I definitely need to review the principles again, and just that way I don't fumble through I imagine the first 3 hours they'll talk about the design and development phases. So I definitely got to revisit that. But yeah, it's been mostly CI/CD, and that's kind of what we'll be looking at tonight. Marcos is here. How you doing, Marcos? Nick is also here. I'm doing great, Nick. I'm hopefully glad you're able to make it. You've definitely, you, Marcos, and Matt, pretty much blues everyone. Everyone in chat you guys have been sticking with me for a few months, so I really appreciate it. All right, so we're gonna do a couple things tonight. One, it's all around CI/CD pipelines, but the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to take a look at a CI/CD pipeline that I've been working on with in GitLab, and it actually uses my home lab as like the test network. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to dive into I reserve the NSO sandbox. So there's a DevNet learning lab for NSO and a CI/CD pipeline. I forget the name of the lab, but we'll take a look at it. We're going to go through the entire lab. I did take a look at it the other night. Very doable. I mean, all the code's pretty much written. So we're going to go through it as far as, understanding how these different tools, for example, NSO, Ansible, PyTS, like how all this connects, right? Because that's the idea through this exam and through this journey is how it all connects, not just, hey, what's the syntax of this one specific action? That's important too, but understanding the bigger picture and why we use these tools is obviously the biggest thing you can learn and take away from this. So this is the, hey, how are you doing? Air Disabled, how are you? This is the NSO lab. This is the NSO and CI/CD lab. There's a lot here. And I will tell you right now, the only things we're touching are the NSO instance, the DevBox, NSO, GitLab, and then I think 4 of these devices. But you can see here, there CML, Netbox is even in here for those that are interested. Netbox is an open source DCIM tool. The developer and the lead maintainer, Jeremy Stretch, has been doing some really great things with his the company he works for now. NS1, I believe, is the name. NS1 or NS1 Labs. They're putting out some really good content on NS1 Labs YouTube channel. So it's kind of a free plug there. Definitely check out if you're interested in keep hearing about open source projects and like you're interested in coding, but you want to be able to contribute to a project that makes sense in your mind as a as a network engineer. The Netbox project is a really good one, and like I said, Jeremy with their newest release 3.2, I think it's 3.2. He has some really good content on YouTube on explaining what the new features are, how to use them, how to apply them. So anyways, we won't be touching Netbox tonight. That actually may be a future stream after this whole DevNet Expert. The road to DevNet Expert, we might take a look at Netbox in the future because it is a really cool tool. But Blue says NSO in a CI/CD pipeline. Okay, got it. Yeah, that I believe that is the name. And Matt says, "Whoa, Netbox." Yeah, dude, Matt, you're spot on. Netbox is really cool. I will admit I don't have too much experience. I set it up a couple times, but I haven't really dove into it. So, all right. But before we dive into that, like I said, I promise, I want to show what I've been working on in the background this week. So I created yet another repository called DevExpert-Ansible, and this is on GitLab. Hence, it's confirmed that we're using GitLab in the DevNet lab environment. So I figure, especially with CI/CD, running everything through GitLab, it just makes sense. But as I promised, I will work on basically bringing everything into one repository, probably the GitHub repository, for those that are interested in just training and practice that I've done. But this repository will probably stay as is because it has that CI/CD component to it. So you'll see here bunch of Ansible configuration, right? So you have roles, playbooks, host variables, group vars, and then config templates. And so the real part we're interested in is GitLab CI. And I created I put some comments throughout, and I try to do this for those that are interested. I try to put comments through all my work. So whatever I'm thinking at the time or something I'm reading, I just put a comment and say, hey, like this is what it's for. For example, the pips. I don't know why it changes pips. The pip cache to inside the project directory. So basically, it's allowing us to cache our pip installs, right? Our package installs. So that would be that. But at the top here, like you can see a pipeline. What's a job? What's a stage? And then typical pipeline consists of 4 stages, and then these are the stage names. It's just little things that if you're reading through this, you'll read through my CI/CD example, and then maybe take a look at some of these definitions. So if we go through this CI/CD config file, you can see we do a few things. So there are individual, I guess to start at the top, CI/CD in GitLab, the main components are jobs and stages. Jobs are the individual files that run, are the individual tasks that run. So right here, this would be our first job, build a Python environment, right? And then each job is assigned a stage. And jobs that are in multiple jobs in the same stage can run in parallel, unless you say not to. But basically, if I had multiple steps for the build process or the build stage, I could list out another job and then just say stage build. And I just quickly glossed over that, and I didn't really mention it, but this is a YAML style, a YAML document. So for those that are like, wow, this is really easy to read, it's because it's YAML. Blues asks, what type of executor is configured in your GitLab? So interesting question. An executor, and I'll kind of explain as I go along. Executor, there's multiple executor types. And what Blues is asking is, just give me a second with that, Blues. Actually, how about that? Because I feel like if I jump to that, then it won't make sense here. So I'll run through this real quick, though. So basically, in each of these different builds or these jobs, the environment is built from the ground up, right? Like, so whatever happens in this job, right, doesn't get carried over to this job. So you might be asking, well, in a project like building a Flask app, or, well, really more not even built software development, but more like the network automation side, you're pretty much going to be using the same environment. For example, like an environment with Ansible, PyTS, NSO. You have the same tools installed, and that's not really the focus. The focus is the network itself and how you're building it or how you're testing it or whatnot. So the way to carry specific information over from job to job is using a cache, or what GitLab refers to as a cache. So within the so you basically declare a cache, and then you declare the file paths that you want to carry over, right? Or you want to cache, I'm sorry. But think of it as carrying over. So here you'll see I created a variable to change the pip cache, right? Pip is obviously pip install, and then you install your packages. I changed that pip cache directory. And then in my cache, I said, okay, that new pip cache directory, I want that to be cached, and then venv is my virtual environment. I want that to be cached. So that way, if I have to pip install again, right, I can create my Python, my virtual environment should be there. But if I need to pip install anything that I've just recently pip installed, it should be in my cache, which hence should take lesser time to build, right? The reason why I'm mentioning the cache and going between the different jobs and stages is ultimately you want the CI/CD pipeline to run really as quickly as possible, right? Without cutting corners. So if something makes sense, right? Like in a software development world, your application should be portable, and really you should be standing up a new instance of your application for every different test, right? You can build it and then maybe cache it, but then use a new instance of your application for every test, right? Whether it be unit testing, integration testing, like you'll probably want to use a brand fresh new instance in case you manipulate it in some way. Nick asked, I know to not have too many jobs in a stage, but is there a guideline for limits on the number of stages? Good question, Nick. I don't know. I don't know if there's a limit on the number of stages. This is straight from the GitLab. From the GitLab documentation, the standard stages, which ultimately I don't know. Like, I guess you could go a little further, but like build, test, staging, and production are your main stages. I think, I don't know if this is right, but I want to say I saw like 1,000 jobs. There were like limits on the number of jobs, I believe, but not stages. But really, I don't know how many more stages you could do. That would make sense, but yeah, these are kind of the main 4 stages. But I've seen a couple where I think I've seen it up like 6 or 7 in some of the YouTube videos and documentation I've seen. 6 or 7 stages. Okay, so we cache. The cache, like I said, kind of carries over. And just, I may say it, so I just want to clarify. There's cache, and then there's artifacts. Artifacts are things that you can basically think of it as like something that's downloadable, right? And it doesn't have to be downloadable. I'm just saying it so that way you get a better picture of it. An artifact is something you could take away from the CI/CD. It's like an output, right? So like in many cases when you're developing software, you may have to go through like a packaging stage and deploying it, right? So if I was to create like a Python package and I want it to go to PyPy, I'd publish it to PyPy, and then maybe I wanted to download the source code, right? Well, that would be an artifact of the CI/CD run. So just want to clarify that you might hear me say artifact, but I mean, like, I'm kind of going through the caching section. So anyways, so that's caching. I think I beat that up enough. Beat that section up. So now we're jumping into the actual stages and the jobs. So there's a before script section here, and this basically, it's ran before every single job, right? So my jobs here are build Python, confirm Ansible version, deploy to test network, and then production. These are the different jobs. Before every job, this before script section runs. So you can see I verify Python, the Python version. I create a virtual environment, and then I source it, right? I source to the virtual environment. And so now that I'm in the virtual environment, right? I build the Python environment. I'm sorry, I jumped to the build Python environment job, which is in the build stage, and then all I do is pip install the requirements txt. Anytime you see, by the way, this $sign and then the all caps, these are kind of reserved variables, and so this one's pretty straightforward. It's the CI project directory. So think of it as like your root project directory, and so root project directory, and it's right there on the root requirements.txt. So that installs all the requirements for you. And then after this stage, if you remember, right, we have a cache to cache the virtual environment. So after that, after this stage, we jump to confirming the Ansible version, and that's in the test stage. And so before this script runs, confirming Ansible version, we run everything in before script. So we go through, create the virtual environment, and then activate it. So it sounds confusing, but basically just know that it runs, it installs the dependencies, and then we have the virtual environment cached. And then that virtual environment we then use as we go through each of the next steps. And so really this one, we confirm the Ansible version just literally by running the command ansible -- version. And then we have the following jobs to deploy to the test network. So you can see I run an Ansible playbook. I use the limit flag -L to testnet, and then I run the iOS configure playbook using that vault password that we referenced last week in last week's stream. And then if that passes, I don't have any constraints here, but if that passes, then it moves on to production. And this is a manual job. So really this whole pipeline is more of a CI pipeline because it doesn't automatically deploy. And the way right here using when manual allows it to be a manual job. So I actually have to go in and say, I actually have to click like a manual play button to allow it to deploy to production. And honestly, I've never ran a full CI/CD pipeline in a production environment. But if I were to introduce it to, whether it be, customer environment, or anything in that nature, I would definitely say, hey, let's do a CI pipeline. That CD part, the delivery and the deployment, let's just hold off. Allow that to be a manual process that kicks off by, an actual end user before going through the whole automatic deployment. Nick asks, let's see. I wonder if any backing services needed for the app in the CI/CD pipeline is already provisioned, or if that is something that you will develop during the lab, if appropriate. Yeah, so honestly, the way that I have this built right now isn't ideal. Ideally, what I would like to do, and I didn't do it only because I wanted to focus on the CI/CD pieces, is I would create a Docker image that had all of everything in my requirements txt file, right? And just to show you what that looks like, we'll go back. So it's pretty much just Ansible. Paramiko's here, NC client. But yeah, it's pretty much just Ansible. But what I would do is I would install these into a Docker image, all these dependencies, and I would use a Docker image for all of this. So that way, every step would just do a Docker pull and pull down the image. And after the first run or after the first job, it would be cached. So I would just do a Docker pull and then run all the commands and stuff within the Docker container. That's how I'd actually do this if I move this into more of a production. And that might be something that's on the test, because if you guys remember from the exam topics, there was one that would create a Docker image using a Docker file. I just didn't want to mess with the Docker side of it. Like I said, this week was more around CI/CD. So using this this CI workflow is probably a little verbose, especially going through and creating the Python virtual environment from scratch. I probably would go through and instead going back to Blue's question, Blue's asked my executor environment. So whenever you set up a GitLab runner, so I guess to kind of put a bow on this, you have this set up, right? And whenever it's in the root of your project, you go back here, right? It's in the root of my project. It's automatically, GitLab sees it and will automatically start running it, right? Or trying to run it. The way that this is ran, this doesn't just get ran in the clouds, right? Like, it's not magic. It's ran using what's called a GitLab runner. And the way that works is, if I go to settings here and go to CI/CD, you can see, where's my runners at? You can see I have, I do have a runner, and it's online, right? So you basically install the runner software, the GitLab runner package on, I think you can install it across Linux, Windows, or Mac, I think. I always use Linux, obviously, Ubuntu. And so I installed the software on my old Ubuntu machine. This was before I got the DevNet the candidate workstation image. So I have the service running here, and just to show you, I think it's systemctl status. I think it's GitLab-runner. There we go. So you can see here, it's just a service. It's a daemon that's running on this Ubuntu server. And so basically, as soon as it comes online, reaches out to GitLab and kind of does a call home. And once it's online, you can then specify specific settings for the runner. So the one question Blues had, and Matt, I see your question. I'll get to it in just a sec. Is the GitLab runner will ask what type of executor would you like this to be? And here are your options. SSH, Shell, Parallels, VirtualBox, Docker, Machine, Kubernetes, or Custom. The two popular ones are Shell and Docker. And to answer your question, Blues, I initially had Docker set up, but then when I realized that I didn't have a Docker image that would fit the bill, I reverted and went to Shell. And with the Docker executor, it literally, you provide an image in your CI/CD file, and it will pull down that image and use that for every job, right? Just natively. Shell is exactly what you think it is. It literally runs just shell commands. So it's really good to start out. So if you're looking into this, I would highly recommend starting with Shell because it's very easy to understand, especially if you get errors along the way. Shell is definitely the way to go to start. And then you'll quickly probably realize Docker is it's much easier, especially for the build process, right? Because with Shell, you might have to run a shell script. I mean, honestly, I could probably put everything in a shell script to start, create the Python virtual environment and everything. But you have to do all that manually, whereas a Docker image, it's all nice and packaged up in a container for you. Matt asks, it actually looks like Blues may have answered, but let me just read through this. Matt asks, why would it be necessary to stand up a new Ansible instance and requirements every time the pipeline begins? And Blues answers, it's because when you create a new pipeline instance, it's meant to be an atomic task. Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, Matt, so it's meant to, the job will define certain criteria. So going back to the stages, let me go back to here. We'll go back to the CI/CD in a second. So yeah, as Blues kind of answered it, but the different stages accomplishes different tasks. And if we go back to build, test, staging, and production, let's say in build or test, we're not just doing something that's a read-only task, right? Let's say we're actually trying to mess with the environment to verify whether it's regression testing or something to where we change the environment. We want to be able to change the environment and not worry to have to back out of all those changes, right? And that's kind of where Blues is saying atomic task, right? Whatever we do and we get the expected result, right, is immediately at the end of it, what if the exit code, is 0, fine. All right, ball it up, throw it away. And then we go on to the next job, and then it starts with a fresh slate. So that kind of goes back to atomic task. But yeah, otherwise, if you think about this, you'd have to go through, and let's say we did something to test our image or test our piece of software, and it was invasive, we'd have to somehow back that out. So Matt asks, so it's creating the pipeline, but you can run multiple automation jobs through the pipeline until you redefine the pipeline. So it's creating the pipeline. So there's one pipeline, and let me just do this. How about this? I'll go to my last pipeline run, and so that way you can kind of visualize what it looks like. So each of these are jobs, right? The results of this job do not affect this job, right? And so it's not you're creating a new pipeline per se, but each job has its independent task, right? And so whatever's ran against in this case, we're running it against a network, but most of the time with CI/CD, it's a piece of software. So here, it's a build stage, right? We're making sure, in this case, we're building a Python environment, so it's like, it is what it is. But you may, like for some programming languages, be compiling something, right? So let's say you made a bunch of changes in your code, and when you try to go to compile it, obviously, like if us being network engineers trying to become, looking at the coding side, we can just run everything in our terminal and be like, oh, compile, oh, it didn't work. But if you have large teams and you're sending this code to a repository, you want a automated test to go through and verify that the build actually compiles before you can run any tests. So that's kind of where that build stage comes from. And then same with test and staging. Test is more, you might be doing linting or doing security checks, making sure packages aren't out of date. And yeah, it kind of, GitLab refers to it as garbage collection, right? And so it's kind of the same thing too if you have too much cached or too much, you don't have any sort of clean, like if you created artifacts after every single stage, you'd have a lot of different artifacts. Most of the time you would have, 1 or 2 artifacts at the end of staging or production. That would just realistically make sense because that assumes all these other stages passed. Nick asks, can GitLab do automatic cleanup of the builds and artifacts after the pipeline is done, or is that a manual task someone else has to do? So the builds, I guess whenever you say builds, I'm assuming you mean the entire pipeline run. Yes, so GitLab takes care of that. That's the garbage collection piece. Next, or is cleanup a stage in the pipeline? No, so cleanup is automatically handled. It's kind of the quote-unquote garbage collection. That happens automatically. The artifacts, there's actually, if you take a look at GitLab's, let me just pull it up here, GitLab artifacts, there we go. GitLab will actually keep the job artifacts. Oh, there's a pipeline artifacts there too. It will keep it for X amount of days. Let me see if I can find. Here we go. So to answer your question, and I don't know if this is a different page, so I'll check out pipeline artifacts here in a second. But you can see here, you can configure the artifacts. It's pretty simple, right? So like here, you would put artifacts within one of your jobs, and you would just say paths, and then the path to wherever you're saving your artifacts to. And then to download them, you would, at the end of the pipeline run, you would literally just have a little download button. So that is kind of the artifacts piece. Here you go. The keep button indicates expire in value. Yeah, so there is an expire value that you can, so that way the artifacts will automatically delete. And and so when you so you could download it, or and it'll say like, these are the latest artifacts. They'll not be deleted until newer artifacts are available. So basically, it looks like after every pipeline run, the artifacts are deleted from the previous pipeline run. So hopefully that answers your question, Nick. So the garbage collection is automatic, and then the artifacts are automatically removed as well. Just the latest will show here. And I imagine through different parameters, if you wanted to keep artifacts from every single run, you could, that's possible as well. The artifacts archive, yeah. There you go. If you view failed job artifacts. So yeah, to answer your question, it looks like you can delete them manually, or I'm sure that there's a way you could set it to where it expires. Matt says, thanks, Dan. Still a bit over my head, but I guess that's why I'm an associate. Well, if it makes you feel better, Matt, I'm no expert, okay? Not yet. But yeah, it's kind of tough, Matt. I will say, like, you really have to change your mindset. You have to start looking at the network as software and data, nothing more. That's because at the end of the day, right, it routes packets, and you have to understand the networking piece to really, understand the severity of changing configuration. But at the end of the day, you have to understand all it is just bits and bytes, right? So networking, you're extracting data out, performing some sort of check on it, or you're collecting it just for, historical purposes, or, you're treating it as configuration. I mean, and that's through any vendor. That's not just a particular vendor. But it's just a weird, especially once you get, like, because now we're in the software side of the house, right? This is like, I mean, how many times do you, if your day job, let's say, is to deploy offices or refresh hardware equipment, how many times are you going to be in GitLab.com in the docs, right? You're not. So it's definitely a different approach. And, it's definitely catching steam, but it's hard to relate, especially like, if you're out with other network engineers, or I'm sure like if you're at Cisco Live, there's a bunch of people in the DevNet zone, but like if you're talking with another network engineer that introduces themselves as a network engineer, you're probably going to ask them like about spanning tree or routing protocols, not, oh yeah, your CI/CD, what kind of CI/CD pipeline issues have you had recently? But sooner or later, I think we'll get there. Nick says, in prod, where does it make sense to configure the GitLab runner? On each dev's machine, or on the remote Git repository only? So good question, Nick. Going back to, let's see, where was I? The settings. Yes, the runner. So to answer your question, you definitely don't want the GitLab runners on the dev machines. Because the runners have to be online to be used, right? I mean, I guess technically you could, but for me, I would probably do something along the lines of, like, I'm sure like with the software that you purchase for monitoring or anything like that, you have an instance in dev or QA, and then you have a separate one in prod. I would probably do something along those lines with runners. Have like, your dev QA servers, wherever that cluster lives, just put a GitLab runner there, and then a GitLab runner in your prod cluster. But to go back to runners real quick, because I didn't finish that. So whenever you're setting up a runner, you get asked about the executor, which sounds crazy. Like when you're like, executors, like what the heck is that? But yeah, if you're interested, like they have really good examples about all required dependencies. So for shell, the shell executor, all required dependencies for your builds have to be installed manually. Whereas Docker, like I said, is the other popular one. It allows a clean build environment, easy dependency management. So it's where you create just that Docker image. And that might be something on the test, to be honest, right? I'm going to be doing this over the weekend, revamping the CI/CD pipeline I'm showing you now, because there's a lot of room for error when using the shell executor. So I'm going to go back to the Docker executor, create a new Docker container with all the Ansible dependencies I showed you, and then allow it to run just using the Docker image versus having to install those dependencies every time. Blues looks like he's answering your question as well, Nick. He says, Nick, we have configured GitLab server on an ESXi VM and also a runner on the same VM. You can also create new VMs for the runners. Yeah, kind of like what I was saying. Just definitely wouldn't put it on any sort of workstation, just because, for whatever reason, developer can take it home or turn it off at night, right? And you might still because the whole point of a CI/CD pipeline is you can actually have this run not just when you push changes to your repository, but on a schedule. So think about like if you were to have a CI/CD pipeline that ran every 2 hours, that all it did was verify that your network was configured properly based on a YAML file or whatever. It doesn't have to be YAML. I'm just picking on YAML. Then you would want something that's dependable and always on. Nick says, based on my limited experience with GitLab, I was thinking about having the runner executed to the background and then scheduled to be run automatically on reload or boot up, if this makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of what. So you can pretty much, that's the way it's installed, is as a daemon on a Linux, right? It's basically a background service. So yeah, it'll like that. I didn't have to set anything up. I know I just did a quick system CTL status, but I didn't like manually start the service. It boots up with the machine. So yeah, as long as you install it as a background service, you'll be good. Okay. So, one last note about the runner, what I'm trying to get to. So these down here, Net DevOps and Python. So these are called tags, and you can, based on your CI/CD file, you can run specific CI/CD pipelines on specific runners, right? So you can, going back to your dev versus prod, you can have a set of GitLab runners that have the tag dev and and then a separate fleet of them that have the tag prod, if you wanted to separate your work like that. But at the end of the day, it's really just to whatever workloads take a long time, you don't want to flood every runner with that, right? So you want to be able to split that up and be able to define, hey, these longer running pipelines probably should only take this 25% of the pool. Because if we allow it to just eat up anyone that's available, nothing else will run. So the use of tags allow you to specify what runners to use. In this case, we just have one runner, so it's not that big of a deal. But just to show you, you can see in the default section, there's a tags. And I just tagged this one as Net DevOps. So you saw that there was Net DevOps in Python. So this one will run on that single runner. But by default, if a runner has no tags, then it will just take whatever job it gets. Because basically GitLab, when this pipeline runs, we'll shoot it off to the list of runners and say, hey, I have a job with no tag. And then a runner with no tag would say, hey, I got this. Or even if it had a tag, hey, I got this. But using tags allows you to be more specific. Nick asked, when doing these labs on a home machine and not working in a dev environment with other folks, some stuff I'm making assumptions about. Didn't know that. Hey, I'm the same way, Nick. I definitely, Twitter's helped me out a lot, and I've met some really cool people. Obviously, the Discord that we're part of, the Art of Network Engineering Discord, has helped out a lot. Just talk to other people. So that's the beauty of it with community, is you learn from someone else every day. Whether I get this expert badge or not, at the end of the day, if I'm going through a live stream and you're like, yeah, that's BS, you can call me out on it. Like you can say, quote unquote, be an expert, but at the same time, you're always learning. So it's kind of different, but it's also exciting. That's what makes tech really fun. All right. So that's it. That's it for like I said, my homemade CI/CD pipeline. I didn't really go over what it did. I mean, whenever, like, obviously it installs some Python dependencies, basically just Ansible. It verifies the Ansible version. This is really just a this doesn't really do much. This just literally prints out the Ansible version. And then down here, you can see deploy to test, deploy to prod. I need to add some more. So a few things. One, I need to create a Docker container that has all these dependencies in it, so I don't have to install the requirements. And the build's pretty much done at that point. And I also need to create some more rules when it comes to deploying the test network and then deploying to production. Production, I did put a safeguard to say when manual, so that way it has to be manually run. But I don't want to, I need some more protection around deploying to test network, some more parameters and rules. So that's something I'll probably work on this weekend. And obviously I'll put it out on Twitter whenever I make some updates. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just to show you what playbook runs. So I have a bunch of playbooks here that I was practicing, with XML, netconf. You can see it's this one here. This is the playbook that runs. So you can see it's very basic. Configure some NTP servers on iOS devices. This one specifically targets only iOS devices because I'm running viOS images in my CML instance. So configuring NTP servers and then configuring IP helpers on every interface. This is where I tried getting a little, creative with using loops and then conditionals. And then lastly, I'm backing up the images. The configs are not stored in Git, the raw configs, because I just didn't, every time this runs and the pipeline runs, it would store the config, and I didn't want to do that. So those aren't part of my git ignore file, this config backups directory that it stores to. But basically that's what happens. That's what happens every single time I make a commit to this project. So, and that's another thing too. I need to put some more rules around only if the commits are, it's either a merge request or the commits are going to on the master branch. Otherwise, if it's a separate branch, only run against the test environment, right? So that's some other safeguards I need to kind of go through as well. Nick asked, have you had a lot of experience with this? I ask in the content of seeing faults and then correcting them so that you can remedy them in the lab if a problem comes up. Intentionally doing faults is also learning. Yeah, I do. I will say I'm not in CI/CD pipelines all day. Definitely not like a DevOps engineer, my day job, but I do have experience with them. And honestly, you can get very creative with them. That's the one thing that's interesting is if you can imagine it, you probably can do it. You just have to figure out the best way to. Like you can see, I've already kind of looked at ways to improve the current pipeline that I've built out. But yeah, I kind of get, you corrected the context. Yeah, that's kind of the way I might have said content, but yeah, I read it as context. I ask in the context of seeing faults and then correcting them. Intentionally doing faults, I do sometimes, but most of the time it's all by accident, and I don't pick them up until someone corrects me either on stream or I reread and go back through what I've created, and then I find them. So yeah, that's actually, I will say, faults, correcting your faults is probably the best way to learn, and that's why I try to go through it multiple times. All right, that's it for this. There's a lot here. I didn't touch. I created roles. So there's a role for logging under a common global role. There's an edge router role, which has what I started with BGP. So there's a lot that some of it's completed, some of it's kind of work in progress. You can see my latest commit was building out more roles, which is whip. So actually, that was my latest commit on that directory. I was like, I definitely worked on it a little bit this week. Beginning of the week, I was working on it. So that's it for like the like I said, homegrown, still work in progress CI/CD pipeline. So now to switch things up a bit, we're gonna dive into this NSO lab. And yep, I am still on. We go to NSO Learning Lab. I think I bookmarked it. Yeah. I gotta sign in real quick. Hold on, let me just shoot this off the screen as best I can. So I'm gonna sign in real quick. Oh, I'm already signed in. I thought I was. Let me just expand this again. Nick says, thinking about linting tests. If a curly brace or a parenthesis is missing or something wasn't added to Git and committed to the pipeline file. Yeah, so I was thinking about using linting in the context of normally with like a code project. So like if that was a Flask application, right, and I was building out an API, there'd be some code linting and there'd be code formatting, probably some static code analysis in general. But with an Ansible playbook, really the only two linting libraries I found, which, like I said, I'm trying to balance creating a whole big creating like my project and then focusing on like what's the exam topic. But as far as linting with Ansible, they actually have an Ansible lint library, and then they also have a YAML lint library. So that's kind of where I could add that step. And actually in one of my GitLab projects, I have that step. I think I'm using Ansible. I think it's called Ansible lint. And so I use that step. I'll say Ansible lint, and then I'll run it against all my playbooks, and it'll lint all those and verify, missing commas, curly braces, whatever. All right. So this lab should be interesting, hopefully for all. If not, I'll try to keep it as interesting as possible. So NSO, Network Services Orchestrator, very cool tool. I did a stream on it a month ago, maybe. I feel like everything just feels like a month ago, but I also have to remind myself I've been doing these DevNet expert streams for like 4 months now. So I did a stream on NSO. Very cool tool. I wish I had a little more time with it, and I will have some more time, leading up to this crunch period I'm about to hit right before the exam. It's for those are unsure, unaware. I think everyone in the the ones in the chat. Blues said YAML lint. Yeah, that's probably the one I use, Blues. I don't know where I got Ansible lint from, to be honest with you. I don't know. Maybe I was just imagining it. Or Ansible syntax check command. Yeah, that might be a good one too. Anyways, so Cisco NSO, it's ran through Yang data models. Everything is modeled through Yang, and it creates a level of abstraction that you can interact with multiple network devices and use a single command line. That's the best way I can put it. You can manipulate multiple devices at the same time using a familiar command line. They have two main flavors, one more Cisco-esque and another one that's more suited, more like Junos, right? Juniper-esque. You can have different ways of outputting the data in different formats. It's a very cool tool, and I don't think it gets enough attention. Most likely because there's a lot of, you kind of see this as it's a paid product. If you wanted to get it started in an enterprise, you have to go through sales and do kind of POC and all that. But it's a very cool tool. And I think everyone should at least. They do have what they call a local installation that you could get it up and running, and I actually have it running on that Ubuntu machine. But we're not going to dive into my installation. We're going to purely stick with the lab. And you can see it's allows you to, it really is an abstraction over different devices and different device models. And you can see the abstraction is called, they use the concept of NEDs, which are network element drivers. And you can see here all the different platforms and operating systems. And you're probably looking at this list like, whoa, like it doesn't just say Cisco. Oh yeah, it really is. It covers multiple vendors, and on top of it, it's all modeled data in the background using Yang data models, which is an industry standard. Still, I will say there's still some adoption that's needed for it. But at the end of the day, it's not like they just throw a bunch of data in the background and throw it in like a database and they do some really crazy, wacky stuff to get your data out. No, there is a lot of structure in the background. And so it's pretty cool. It's overall just a very cool tool. But we're not here for NSO. We are here to learn more about the CI/CD process and kind of ultimately how we can use NSO as a component of our CI/CD pipeline. And so if we go to, so it talks about setting up NSO. You can use a system install, which is on a dedicated server. That's that. If you were to purchase the product and kind of go down that path, you would, do a system install. And that's centralized, always on. And then local install is more for development, right? It's free. You can get it up and running, but it's not meant to run an organization. So local install is probably the most popular just because anyone can get it up and running. But, it says first step here is to reserve the instance of the sandbox. Check. Done. I did. Yeah. So they changed up the NSO sandbox a little bit because it says, this NSO reservable sandbox. That's what I did. And you see there's, just NSO and DevBox. Well, they added a couple other things. Netbox, GitLab, a couple more devices. You get the point. And so this is kind of where we're starting. So first we're going to dive into the DevBox. And hopefully this works. Making sure my VPN's still up. Okay, VPN's still up. What is it? 10.10.2050. 10.10.2050. Okay, that's promising. All right. So we're in the dev box now. And they're just saying to show what's here. So our local NSO installations right here. NSO. If you go into it, you can see this is literally, if you were to install it, because I've installed it before, this is what you're getting. This NCSRC file, we'll have to source it. And I'm going to follow the instructions. So, I'll just verify that. But, let's see here. Yeah, folder name, NSO. It unpacks, prepares your system to run NSO, but doesn't actually start it up. You have to create a NSO instance tied to a project, which we have not done yet. Look at the contents of NSO packages NEDs. So if we do NSO packages NEDs, and let me see if I can somehow make this bigger size. Okay, I'm not sure what that actually did. So hopefully you can see it on stream. I apologize if you can't, or if you can't read it well. Never mind. Here we go. I found it. I found the secret zoom button. All right, there we go. So I'm just looking in the NSO packages NEDs. And remember, these NEDs are what allow you to connect to different device types. You see 810, a bunch of Cisco, as you'd expect. Juniper, I'm sure no one expected that one. Especially it's being, from Cisco. But yeah, Cisco, Dell, Juniper, and so on. Anyways, this is kind of what allows you to NSO to connect to the different devices. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Number net devices indicates the version. Okay, let's create the instance. So one of the included scripts with NSO is NCS setup, which makes it easy to create. NCS is the original name of the NSO project, so you preface many commands and application features with NCS. Think of NCS as another name for NSO. You want to use the name of the NED folder for the latest NED, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is the NCS setup. So this basically is creating the NSO instance. And we have to, within this setup process, we have to declare all the packages we want to use. So all the different devices we want to connect to. Hold on. No, this wasn't it. Blues, you have me. That's exact. Yeah. So I was in the wrong lab. I was like, wait, this doesn't seem right because, let's see. Blue says, are we in the right lab? I saw your message out of the corner of my eye, but then I was reading through that and I'm like, I don't remember creating a new instance of this. And I don't remember the lab being this long. And I was like, and I think I did this lab before. So I was like, I know NSO is involved, but it wasn't this involved because CI/CD was the purpose. Okay, but I promise you, I do have the right sandbox because this is the same sandbox. I just used this sandbox the other day. Here we go. Yeah. Here we go. After you log in the dev, here we go. Okay. Yeah, good luck, Blues. Good luck. Where are we? Okay. So we are, so we're in the home directory. Okay, here we go. Reset. All right, pause. If you were watching on the VOD, I apologize. You may have learned a little bit in NSO right there. But now we're in it. Now we're actually in the actual lab. So lab's ready. We're already, same dev box. We're SSH to it. Now we're setting up GitLab. Here we go. Here we go. All right, so we're going to git clone. And like I said, a lot of the code's already built for us. We're just cloning it, and then we're running the local GitLab instance. And so, that just goes into it. NSO CI/CD. So this kind of shows you, what we're going to be doing. And if I do setup, you'll see we're installing PyTS, Genie, the Cisco NSO Ansible module, and then we're creating a local Docker image with Ansible installed to use with the GitLab runner. So we're actually doing a few things. We're installing all these dependencies, which include NSO, the NSO Ansible extension, Ansible itself, and PyTS and Genie, which will be used for the testing piece. And then we're also spinning up a local instance of the GitLab server. So what I showed you, GitLab.com, is obviously public. This is actually, we're going to be spinning up a local Docker instance of GitLab. And I actually meant to do this before because it does take a little bit. So if we do shell, I'm going to go ahead and start running it and oh yeah, we're on the dev box. Okay. All right. Now I'm back in it. We're back in it. Nick says, you may have already done that other lab. Yeah. Hey, that's why I have you guys around. That's why I'm glad you're here in the chat, because I was like reading it and I was like, this sounds very familiar. why am I setting up an NSO instance? And sure enough, yeah, you guys caught it. And Blues right away was like, yeah, that's not it. And so, yeah, good catch, Blues. Good catch. And if I remember right, this actually does take a few minutes. So if you have any questions, you already saved my butt with reminding me to go to the other lab, go to the actual lab we're working on. Feel free to ask your questions now. Otherwise, we'll just be waiting it out. I guess I could go over real quick while that's doing its thing. So, man, I wish. Let me see here. There's no pictures, man. There's no pictures. I wanted to show you all pictures of what the pipeline looked like. Anyways, so the pipeline, the way this looks is, Nick said, I didn't know you can run scripts that way. I've always done with the the period and then the /. Yeah, invoking the shell. But so the NSO, the pipeline, the way it looks at a high level, NSO is an orchestrator, right? It has all your network inventory. As I went through in my previous lab that I just did 10 minutes ago, it manages all your devices for you. It manages all your connections for you. It is really that central orchestrator. So we have NSO, which has all of our devices. And then on top of it, we're going to use Ansible to interact with NSO. So the way you can interact with NSO is using its REST API. And Ansible has an HTTP API connection type that allows you to make API calls. So Ansible will be making an API call to NSO, which will then invoke specific actions to happen. So whether it be getting a list of devices or configuring the devices in a specific way, you can interact with the API is full feature parity with the CLI, which is great. And so that kind of manages at that level. So you have Ansible and NSO. And then on the back end, on the testing side of it, right, you have PyTS, and if you've been around here for a bit, you know I'm a big advocate of PyTS and Genie. I think those projects are phenomenal. The tooling's great. It's an opinionated framework for sure. As far as it's a built-out framework, right? It's not. But at the end of the day, it does its job very well. It's just overall just a great library. So PyTS is used to verify that once you push those changes out, with NSO essentially, PyTS will run a test script against your network and verify. I think in this lab it's ping connectivity. So basic ping tests to verify your devices are all up and running post change. After a change occurs. So we'll take a look at that. But it's kind of cool because, like I mentioned in the beginning of the stream, it touches on all these different tools: Ansible, NSO, PyTS, and GitLab, right? And CI/CD component of GitLab. So it's kind of cool in that way. And so hopefully, if this finishes soon, then we'll be able to get going and see all that in action. Nick asks, is there a particular reason someone might choose NSO or Terraform as an orchestration tool? Good question, Nick. There's a couple components to each. And you're actually giving me a really good question, like sample test question, I think. So NSO is kind of that all-inclusive platform that will, manage your devices. It's an orchestrator, but it's a paid product, right? To really get the full benefit and allow, you get support. it's great with, there's, you pay for it. There's the modeling aspect, right? So if your engineers are comfortable with creating data models or reading data models, because you'll have to do that, whether you customize it at all or just keep it status quo, you'll have to understand Yang data models, because that's really what you'll be editing at the end of the day. And then on the opposite end, you have Terraform, which is more, more of a provisioning tool, I would say. Over, there's provisioning, and then there's standing up resources, and then there's config management, which is more your, Ansible, your Scrapply, all that. And so, Terraform is more provisioning those services. And in our case, I know they recently came out with a iOS XE RESTconf provider for Terraform, but it's not declarative. And if you're, in the art of network engineering, in that Discord, I think it's in the automation channel. I forget his name. Someone put in there and basically said, hey, I tested, they tested it, and they actually found the issue on GitHub where it's not declarative. So it's kind of like they're just doing it to do it, I think. But normally Terraform, you define what you want your infrastructure to look like, and then it deploys it. So it's more declarative in that nature. Blue says customers choose NSO mainly to manage services. Yeah, and that's another thing too. With NSO, it's not just like, okay, here's NTP, right? I want to configure my NTP servers. It's more, you can create NTP, but that can roll up into a larger service that you can roll out to a number of devices. So, Nick asked, both can be single sources of truth. Yes, that can enforce network state. I wouldn't say Terraform as much. NSO for sure. You can, there's the sync from and sync to portions, where NSO has a copy of the configuration. But I wouldn't say Terraform is like that. Terraform is more, it provisions the resources and can tell you what's provisioned based on your Terraform plan. But I wouldn't say it can enforce your network state. Not yet. But it's getting close. I mean, you have to think though, with the bunch of network devices that are virtualized nowadays, you can use Terraform to stand up. But could you imagine, dude? Just think about this. Imagine a day where we use to stand up like a new office, right? Obviously, there's always the physical components like the circuits and the cabling and wiring and whatnot. But imagine the day where your new office setup is literally a Terraform plan, right? Let's say the new office, or I'm just using office in this case because it just makes sense in my head. But you send them a little compute box, and you have everything. You tell them to power it up, plug it into the internet line, and you provision everything, all your network devices virtually onto that compute box using a Terraform plan. That'd be sick and kind of crazy. Because could you imagine if someone messed up that Terraform plan and then just pushed it? You'd be like, accidentally delete a firewall. It's like, hey, where'd my firewall go? Oh yeah, I might have messed up that Terraform plan. Blue said even layer 3 VPN or layer 2 VPN services push and config to multiple devices of different vendors. So that's a more specific use case that is actually like the perfect use case and perfect way to understand NSO. And I don't want to say use cases like, oh, that's like an edge case. It's not. Like that's a good, like there's multiple components to each of those services, and NSO makes it extremely easy to push that config out across multiple devices of many vendors, of different vendors, not just, even pushing to all the same vendor is tough, even with little variables here and there. So yeah, Blues is pretty much spot on with that. So it looks like we're almost done. I knew it was going to take a minute, but Okay, I'm gonna let that finish up, and we can read through the rest of the instructions here. So we're moving on, and an instance of NSO is running at 10.10.2049. It's been pre-provisioned with NEDs and configured to manage the devices in the topology. So basically, this is already provisioned with the NSO instance. Oh, we're not done. Actually, this is the cool part. So you can see real quick. Well, it's too late now. But these are Ansible plays running through, and getting device configuration and then managing those devices. Getting the telling NSO to get the device configuration to sync with the devices, and then change any sort of use Jinja 2 to transform JSON output to YAML file, which I think just exports the some of the inventory. But yeah, so that was like a good example right there. But anyways, now it's set up. GitLab should be ready. Oh, Nick. Nick says, Dan, gonna be honest, I'm gonna miss these Thursday night streams with you. I will tell you that they're not ending. I think I mentioned it. I won't be on next Thursday. I plan to do like a larger, I'm going to do a Saturday stream. How long it goes, TBD. I'm going to try to do something to where it's probably like a 4 to 5 hour stream, to allow you guys to jump in, like I said, something like a Discord call. But the Thursday streams, I'm going to keep going after the exam. So probably I'm going to take a couple weeks off, pass or fail, couple weeks off, just kind of chill out, and then I'm gonna jump back into these streams. It won't be the road to DevNet expert. Like I said, pass or fail. The road to DevNet expert will be completed. If I decide to retake it, if I fail and decide to retake it, I'll be studying kind of to myself. Always available. I will preface with that, but I'll probably go back to just looking at new technologies, new services. So like I think before we started the road to DevNet expert, we started looking at Container Lab a little bit, and then interacting with the CML APIs. Probably do mess around like that, but I definitely am going to keep these going. Nick says Ansible needs to pretty print that config. Oh, wait, you don't think this is pretty printed? You kidding me? You don't see all these nice little return and new line, return character, new line. Here's your printed. Come on now. Duh. But anyways, yeah, so I just went on a little tangent. But yeah, Nick, the streams are not going away forever. I will be back after the exam, specifically for Thursday nights. I'll be back after the exam for a little bit, throughout the summer. And we'll just be doing kind of whatever's on my mind, to be honest. Or whatever, if you guys have anything, if the community asks about something, I'll pull it up and, we'll test things out. Blue says, in the expert lab, step 1, make and execute a script that creates the actual lab. You know what, Blues? You laugh, but I think I could do that. If I had the API documentation for CML, I've done that with Postman. I have a whole collection for CML, so don't joke like that. I could probably do that. Blues, Ansible needs to start using Python rich in all its outputs. Yeah, dude. Rich, at least, if it was a mess, it would be a pretty mess. Very colorful mess. Yeah. So, okay. Up next. Where were we? Yeah. 10.10.2049. So now, so we're in the dev box now. And I think we want to go to 10.10. All right. So now we're in the NSO box. So we have the dev box here, and then we have the NSO box that has everything pre-provisioned for us. And then we jump into the NSO command shell. We pull that up. I remember this like the back of my head, because once you do NSO, you'll never forget NCS_CLI. All right. So let's take a look at the packages installed. Show packages, package oppers status. Okay, so dude, look at that. You get like this nice pretty printed table here, and I get this big long column. But you can see the different packages are those NEDs: ASA, iOS, iOS NX, Resource Manager, SVI, Verify, Example, Self-Test. But you can see all the opera status is up. Got it. Done. Now we want to check out the devices. So going back to here, I don't think they have every device. I think they have like 4 to 6 devices. Let's just take a look. Show devices list is the example. Oh no, it looks like we have all devices here, and they're in an unlocked state. So this is key too. If you guys remember from the NSO lab, being in an unlocked state allows us to, sync to and from and configure the devices. And we have all of them in our inventory. That's good. We could also take a look at it from the GUI. And I think, oh no, I didn't want to go. There we go. I think, Nick, you brought it up the last time when we were actually doing the NSO stream. You were like, hey, is there a GUI to this? Because I'm tired of looking at the CLI. No, you didn't say it like that. But you asked about a GUI, and I think I went over it a little bit. But it is kind of ugly compared to the rest of the Cisco GUIs out there. I should say it doesn't look gross. It's not aligned with the others. It still has that Cisco blue color, but I feel like there's probably a better way to make this look nicer. So we go to Device Manager. You can see we have all the devices, and I could do a ping test. Everything looks good. I can do a sync from. This takes a second because it connects to the device. I can even look at the configuration. So let's take a look at one. iOS. I'm not too comfortable with XR. And then these are all the different models. So these are all the different models, and then the information it contains. And you can see it goes on and on and on and on. But all we had to do is actually just look at the inventory. If any devices are out of sync, click sync from. I'll verify that real quick. None of them say out of sync. They're all good. I mean, I guess I could just do check sync. I'll just run through them all. Let's see what we do here. All right, good. All right, so we're good across the board. Blues asks, are you familiar with the NSO Resource Manager package? To be honest, Blues, I remember looking at it when we went through the NSO lab, but I can't answer it. To be honest with you, I don't know. I'd have to look at like documentation or something like that. Are you familiar with the NSO Resource Manager package? Yeah, that's something, and I'll say flat out, because I don't deal with NSO every day, and really the DevNet expert kind of forced me, like that week I was diving into NSO, I learned so much about it, and I need to, during this crunch period, kind of dive back into it and just refresh on all those different packages. So no, I don't. I would say I'm familiar with it, but I don't know it inside out. Okay, so now we're going to create a project in GitLab. And this GitLab, remember, is an internal hosted GitLab. It's not gitlab.com. So, and you might be like, well, how did we do that? So what we waited on there for 15 minutes, that actually might be exaggerating, was a Docker container to spin up this GitLab instance. And so that's why, we have it internally hosted. And honestly, if you plan to like store code or, kind of move to this infrastructures as code model, either you'll probably have, if you, for whatever reason, if you're public on GitHub or GitLab, you'll be part of an organization that may be private, that have private repositories, or you'll have something hosted just internally, like an internal GitLab server. Blue says you can sync from all the devices from NSO CLI. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to use the GUI. Come on, Blues. I didn't honestly, the last time I remember, I kind of just like shook it off to the side. I was like, don't worry about it. Like, it has a GUI, but I don't really mess with it. I just wanted to mess with it. Yeah. Okay, so we're connected in. I think we had to initialize Git. Oh, no, not yet. So we logged into our internal GitLab server, and we're going to create a new project called NSO CI/CD. So let's go to new project, NSO CI/CD. I don't think they ask you to do anything else. No, just create project. It's going to go through, create the project. And so this is actually one of the more interesting parts here. Let's clear that out. It's not the setup, but if we go to NSO CI/CD and we do tree, you can see all the different files, and this is like our code base. Kind of think of it from that perspective. So we Ansible config file, Ansible inventory, Ansible group vars, PB configure devices, git configs. These are playbooks, PBs for playbooks. The GitLab CI file. So it's in this pipeline folder because it's part of the lab, but we'll get to that. The different tests to run, this is using PyATS. Normally, when you do like Python projects, you put all your tests in a test directory, and then when you use a tool or library like PyTest, it will find that test directory and run all the tests within it. But in this case, we're using PyATS, and then the vars folder, which has, and we'll kind of go through that, has different variables. So you can see root directory contains Ansible playbooks. The configure devices playbook is used in the CI/CD pipeline to deploy configuration from the model definitions. Any changes, right, will be pushed through this playbook. The test folder used PyATS test scripts. Vars contains the model definition of each network device in our lab topology. So let's go ahead and do git config. So we're kind of just going through the whole process of initializing Git. So we'll do git config global, and we'll just say, wait, that's me. I forgot to put user.name. And then we'll do the same thing, git config. So before you push any sort of config or code to, before really you do anything with Git, you want to initialize a name and an email address. And so the reason for that is that will stick with all your commits. So we'll do user.email, and I'll just make a devnet.com. Right, and so now we have a git config, I think it's list, or view. There we go. And this is kind of a key. They don't really like advertise it too much. Actually, I mean, it's in the documentation, but like I know, especially you don't really get too much like feedback from these commands. So you're probably like, did it take effect? And I do -- global because that affects every directory. But if you wanted to affect just this one directory, you could do just git config and then user.name, user.email. But use git config -- list to see what the current git configuration is for this directory, which obviously we just set them, so that's expected. So after we set that, we're going to initialize the git repository, and then we're going to add the project that we just created in GitLab. And so we're going to do git init, and then we're going to do git remote add, and then git remote add origin. My fault. I forgot that part. All right. So now we've added so this NSO repository, right? We've initialized Git. We have our Git configuration, and we added the GitLab repository as our remote, right? Because in Git, you have your local repository, and then you may have a remote repository. So that way, when you do pushes or pulls, it goes to a remote repository. And so we had to add that manually because we didn't clone down this repository. Well, we cloned down the repository. Oh, no, we didn't clone down this one. We cloned down the setup. But we didn't clone it down, so it didn't have this remote origin repository already configured. We had to add it manually. And Nick makes a good point. He says there is a git config file if you need to configure a separate name, email per project. I learned that recently. Yes, there is a config file. But yeah, through the CLI, if you wanted to change it, you can through the CLI you can just use git config user.name, user.email in the Git repository that you want to change. That's a key too, is you have to be within it. Okay, so we've added it. If you're wondering where the URL after origin came from, and yeah, so I know I copied and pasted it, but you can see here, it tells you really here as well. You know, if we want to add it as a remote repository, we can here, or if you use, which I don't even see it, the clone button, yeah, git clone, you could use the URL found there too. All right. So now we want to use git add to stage all of our changes. So you can see here, we have all of our files staged, and I'm jumping between. I kind of know where it's going. I just want to make sure I'm following it, so that way if something messes up, I can be like, okay, well, I followed the instructions. Git commit will be the next. So once we have everything staged, we have to commit our changes. I'm just gonna say git commit initial change, or I'm sorry, initial commit. All right, everything's committed. So now we have changes on our local repository that need pushed. So we just do a git push -u is for upstream, origin master, and master is the name of the branch. So we're going to do git push u origin master, and it's asking for the username password. You could set it up to where it uses SSH instead of HTTP. SSH, you plug in your SSH keys, store them in the GitLab repository or in your GitLab user settings, and it won't ask for these questions. And then in GitHub, I think GitLab might be the same. You can use what's called a personal access token. So that way, when you do git pulls and pushes, it doesn't ask you for your credentials every time. But you can see here, I did the push, created a new branch called master. You can use master or main. Main is another popular name as well. So if we go up here, we'll refresh the page. We should now see our repository here, which we do. You can see all of our files are here. And so we're halfway there. We have our files, all of our code in GitLab, and now we have to define that CI/CD pipeline. And so let's see. The CI/CD pipeline executes scripts. We already went over this. Pipeline is defined with stages: build, test, and deploy. Very relative to what we went over in my homemade pipeline I showed you. And then so this is where we're copying the CI/CD file into the root of the directory, because if you remember here, we have the pipeline folder with the GitLab CI file. So we're going to copy that to the root, and we're going to add the dot in the front, because you have to have that. It has to be .gitlab ci.yaml, so that way GitLab recognizes it. So now I copied it to the root directory, and you see, I think, yeah, list LA. You can see it's here, and Nick mentioned the git config file. That's in the .git folder right here. That's the blue .git folder, and then the .gitlab CI files right here. I just copied it out of the pipeline folder. So if you do a git status now, you'll see that there's a new file. We'll do git add period. Show you git status again. You'll see that there's a new file. Git commit, and then adding GitLab CI file will be my commit message, and then we'll do a git push. Root Cisco. Okay, so now that's pushed. So now when we do a refresh here, we should see a pipeline kicked off, because now that we have a pipeline file in our directory, it should automatically kick off. And you'll see here's the pipeline file, the configuration, and you see this little blue circle saying pipeline running. And so you can see there's only one stage, and it says deploy prod, and it's like, what's going on, Dan? Like, why is it deploying to prod? So if we look at the CI file that we just copied, you can see a few things here. There's a lot more to it than what I did, right? They specified a Docker container to execute all the tests in. So every stage will use the same Docker container. Going back to every test is atomic, it makes sense to use Docker container in this case, instead of going through and doing like a pip install, creating a new virtual environment, and so on. Very manual process. You can see there's multiple jobs though with multiple stages: deploy, test, deploy, test, and then deploy prod. But if you remember, our pipeline only had one of these jobs, only config prod. And the reason it has that is because there's this only parameter setup, only master. So only on the master branch does this job run, right? And then with the other jobs, you can see it says config test except master. So config test job will run anytime it's on any branch but master. And then check connectivity requires the first test to be done, right? Which can only be ran not on master. And also check connectivity runs except on master as well. So that's why these two were excluded, and just this last one runs is because we pushed everything directly to master. The reason why it's like this is because you should never be pushing change directly to master branch. You should always be pushing changes or creating a new branch, right? Testing that branch using these other two jobs here, config test and check connectivity. And then once these pass, then do a pull request to master. And then that will, once it gets to master, these two tests, it's already assumed that these two tests pass, right? Config test and check connectivity. So config to prod is just a given because our tests have already been done on our branch before it was merged. Blues asks, is there a way to create a pipeline instance without making any changes to the project? Not necessarily a pipeline instance, but you can manually run the pipeline. And let me see if I can get that for you. Maybe. Oh yeah, run pipeline. So you can run the pipeline just manually if you wanted to. So it's, and really if like you were testing, so like I kind of get where you're going maybe with this, is if you wanted to see a pipeline run without actually making changes. I've done it before, Blues, where I might just put a couple spaces in a random like text file or like a README file, and because those are considered changes, I push those I commit them and push those changes, and then the pipeline runs. But if you just wanted the pipeline to run to see what it looked like, you can run the whole pipeline, or if you go within a pipeline run, you can click on this little retry button, and it will go through and redo the job for you. Okay, so hopefully that made sense of why just that one job, deploy prod, ran. Because we're on the master branch. And that's kind of what some of these will go over. So, deploy test. So deploy test deploys configuration in the model definitions to the test environment. So going back to it, uses Ansible to interact with NSO, and NSO makes the actual changes to the network devices. All these network devices, the lab environment is in CML, or could be in a virtual environment like CML, which in this case it is. But in your environment, it could be actual physical devices. And then they say like to preserve resources in the sandbox, they use the same CML devices for both test and prod. The test stage runs a PyTS Python script, which pings all the devices of all the connected neighbors. And then deploy prod deploys the configuration to the production network. In this case, it's the same network devices, but if you wanted to target a different subset of inventory, like Ansible inventory, that's where deploy prod would come in. And you can see, you can't tell by the name of the shell script or the syntax, but in mine you can see where I do a -L for limit, and I limit to only prod devices or only test devices. These, because we're using the same devices, you can't tell the difference. It's the same script, right? Ansible playbook inventory, Ansible playback inventory, PB configure devices. It's the same exact command, but normally you would target a different part of your Ansible inventory. Test versus prod. And then for the PyTS stuff, just to quickly highlight it, you do a PyTS run job, and then you run the Python script, and then you give it the test bed and then the specific targets. This is an external file, which will be a data source within the PyTS job, which we'll take a look at. All right, so you commit the pipeline definition, blah, blah, blah. Examine the pipeline job. We did that. And you can see, we're at that point where it's ran. Trigger the pipeline. So this is where we actually go and create a separate branch, and we'll actually do that now. So if you do a git branch, and Blues put this in the chat, and I apologize, Blues, I didn't mention it. But git branch -v will show you the branch and the latest commit. But if you do a git checkout -b, that will create a new branch and check it out for you. So I think this one's just called config change, if I remember, right? Config _change. Okay, so now it's created a new branch, and I checked it out, and you can see if I do git branch, you can see the asterisk next to config change. All right, now that I'm on this different branch, I'm gonna make a change. I'm sorry, we're just pushing it first, I guess. We're not actually pushing. We're just pushing the new branch to GitLab before we do any sort of change. So we'll do git push origin, and then the name of the branch. So git push origin, remember that's kind of the remote side, it's GitLab, and then the name of the branch on the remote server. It's not created, so we could use whatever, but normally you want to match the branch names, not to get any sort of weird issues. So you can see here, config change was set up, and now the remote branch it's tracking with the remote branch called config change. We'll go hit here in GitLab. There's config change. We'll switch over to it, and you'll see that there's a pipeline running, right? And you'll see that there's 2 checks done, right? Remember, going back to that CI file and kind of walking through it, the first 2 jobs said it will run except if the branch is master, right? So this is obviously not the master branch. This is a branch called config change. So these 2 tests will run. However, the prod job did not finish, or won't finish, or what am I trying to say? Initiate. It won't go through because it's not the master branch. Only the master branch can push config to production. So this will go through. And just to show you, I don't think I've actually clicked into a job yet. So this will actually verify using, like I said, it uses NSO, and I'll try to get to the name. So yeah, push configs to devices with NSO config, the task load config. So this is just a debug command. This prints out the device config, and you'll see some of it's pretty printed. And this is just like what you would experience like in a shell. But because GitLab is running all this for you, you can view it. It's viewed on what this is all executed on GitLab, the GitLab runner, but it's all reported back to GitLab. So, and then the magic to it all is if the job succeeds, if it has an exit code status of 0. And so yeah, so now it ensures the devices are in sync. So like, I think Blues mentioned it earlier too. If all the stuff that we were doing through the GUI, we could do through the CLI. Well, I mentioned earlier the CLI and the API are one-to-one. So ensuring, like this task name is ensure devices in sync. And so if I go back to, let me actually just go to the CI file real quick. So you can see for the config test, we run Ansible playbook pb configure devices. So if we go back and we go to pb configure devices, this is an Ansible playbook, right? And so we'll see ensure devices are in sync. We use the NSO Ansible module. So we do NSO action, and then here's the URL and the path, right? So think of the URL as kind of the like base URL. If you're familiar with, if you do a lot of Postman or like other Cisco Learning Labs, base URL is something you see a lot as like a variable. So that's kind of the URL, and then the path is kind of that specific endpoint you want to hit. So you can see here, we loop through the different items, or the different items, obviously with the items, but we loop through this list of device host names, which then get filled into this item section. So you'll see devices/device, and then the name of the actual device within the curly braces /sync2. So when we make that API call to NSO, NSO will then invoke that sync2 action to verify whatever config is in NSO is now on the network device. So, and then same thing, well, not exactly the same thing, but you kind of see where I'm going. Like you use the NSO module in Ansible to do the same thing here, where you're shooting config to NSO, or to the device, I'm sorry, from NSO. You're pushing config from NSO to the device. And you can look at the specific module as well, the NSO module, if you're interested on keywords or want to review. Okay. Let's go back here. and we can see that this passed as well. The pipeline passed for this. Oh, this is master. Let's see if it passed here. Okay, this passed. I'm glad it passed because I think, was it the last time I tried this, I had an issue with one of the devices. I think one of the XR devices. But either way, so we made sure that the config in NSO was synced with the device, and we verified ping connectivity using the PyATS library. And you can see here, this is straight out of PyATS, the AE test framework. Here's your EasyPy report. Here's the test results. What the test was, did it pass or fail, and everything looks good. So let's keep working through the learning lab. And then now they want it. So now what's interesting is we're going to go through and make a configuration change, except it's not going to be a good one. So we're actually going to go into the vars folder, and we're going to go and mess with, was it core router 1? And I'm using Nano. I'm just not good with them. I just can't. Not that I can't, I guess. I'm more comfortable with Nano. All right, so we're going to go down to Gigabit Ethernet L3 link to core router 2, and we're going to change from 37 to 73. All right, so if I see that right, it's right here. Oops. So we're going to change this from 37 to 73, which if it's a layer 3 link, it's definitely going to break it. And so we're going to save it. And I didn't really mention it, but hold on. But this is the model that's defined within NSO. So if you change the configuration, this is the quote unquote infrastructure as code, right? These are defined models of your configuration. So if you change this model, NSO can then take that model and figure out what changed and then push that configuration out for you. So we changed the model, and now it's going to push out that configuration. So we have that changed, and so we're just going to stage it, git commit changed core router 01 config, and then we're going to do a git push. So now what we're doing is we made the change on our branch, and we're pushing that configuration to GitLab, right? And now you can see, because we pushed that configuration to GitLab, it automatically kicks off the CI/CD pipeline. So it verifies, it pushes our config to the test network, and then it will do ping test connectivity, just ping tests to all of our test network devices. So I'm going to let that run for a second, and while it's doing that, just as a side point, think about all the things that this CI/CD pipeline is doing for us. I keep saying CI/CD. It's really just a CI because we're not really deploying to prod yet, but it's running the config against our test network, right? Something you would normally do. And then it's running a test. It's running a simple test, right? It's just doing a ping test, but you could do a lot of things. You could run show commands, parse the output, and verify specific details. So for example, maybe every time this runs, you want to verify that your edge routers have at a minimum of 2 BGP neighbors, right? You could do that using CI, right? Because everything is a shell script. As long as you could run it from the command line, right, from a shell, you can run it, get the results, and validate that everything looks good. Nick asked, I wonder what the impact would be if someone nearly multi-line commented the entire IAC for that device. IAC meaning infrastructure as code. Hopefully, Nick, you have a CI/CD pipeline configured to where it would catch it, and if it fails, then you obviously can't merge it with master, meaning it won't ever show up on the production. So I get what you mean though, like almost like a sabotage. So we'll check into this. What failed? So you can see it failed exit code 1. And the ping test to 172.16.254.37 failed. Interesting. Wonder why it failed. Oh yeah, we accidentally changed that to .73. So that makes sense of why it failed. So yeah, and then this is like the more specific reason. Success rate 0%, but ultimately it failed. So if we go back to the learning lab, yeah, you can see they put the same thing. It failed. Correct the broken config. So we're going to change it back to .37 here. So now we do vars. Oops. I think it was. Oh, we're already in it. Nano core router 01.yaml. So we'll change this back to 37 real quick, and we'll let the pipeline go. All right, git add, git commit, and we say reverted. And there are different ways through Git to do reverts or resets, so that way you can almost, like that commit we made that specific change. There is a way that you can remove that commit, and so that way, and then push the changes up to GitLab, and then it kind of resets it. But in this case, all we're doing is just reverting it manually. But I just want, because I'm using the word revert in the commit message without actually doing any sort of git revert, which is a separate action. All right, so now we're pushing that back up. We changed the config. And so let's see. We'll go to CI/CD pipelines, and this is our latest one. It's running for the config change branch, and we'll watch it as it runs. Nick says it could be an accident. Yeah, it could be an accident, but that's why you have these safeguards in place. So, yeah, I've thought of that too. Like, could you imagine, like, you get someone that doesn't understand? I think I made the joke one time, like, our jobs will turn into, making configurations from YAML files, and like our biggest pain point will be indentation in YAML files, right? Instead of, like, right now it's like figuring out how to parse information, you essentially using regex, but TextFSM, Genie, all these different parsing tools exist. But imagine in the future our biggest problem is YAML indentation. But once again, now that we're in the software development world, you have things like YAML lint that will pick that out for you before you push that to production. So yeah, it's kind of cool. There's a lot to unpack, and I think that's the most interesting part, is when you kind of take your grip off of, oh, these are my precious network configuration files, and look at it from a more holistic picture of, well, I can get this in a more safeguarded workflow. It's really interesting, because now you're borrowing vetted through techniques and practices of the software development world. So it's cool to kind of see that with network engineering. We'll let this finish up. Actually, I'll click into here just to show you while it's running. So it's actually, we're watching it live as it happens, and you can see it's connecting, trying to ping a device, disconnects, and then connects to the next one. There we go. Job succeeded. And everything passed. So now if we go back to our pipelines, you'll see everything passed. Everything looks good. We're looking great. And so everything passed. And now we're on the last section here. Last step is now to merge everything into production. Even though... Oh, yeah, we're going to make one more change. I'm like, even though we didn't make a change, we're going to merge. I forgot. There is one last change we're going to do. The final step is to merge, and we're going to change the description, and I forget where it's at. Gigabit 000. Okay. Let's change this description real quick. Here we go. Description. We'll say, so this says L3 link to core router 2. Yeah, I mean, that was a really good description, but we'll just say DevNet and was here. Easy enough. About as descriptive as you can get for that. And remember, the point of this is just to show that there is a difference from the master branch and this branch. So you're just making a very harmless change. So now if we do git add, git commit, change description on, I think it was like 0, it's like 4 zeros, right? Something like that. All right, we'll do that. Git commit, git push, and run it through the pipeline again. So we'll let that run through the pipeline again. Nick asked, that's a good point. It's possible to do a regex and regex replace of specific pattern, regex substitution. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's, and ultimately, like, I think I mentioned on here before, you know, I contributed to the Genie project, the Genie parser, the, you know, PyTS Genie. The Genie piece is open source, specifically the parsers, and ultimately all it is just regex under the hood, and anyone can go to it. If you look up the Genie parser on GitHub, the Genie parser repository, and go to any of the parser files, it's, you know, it's regex under the hood. And that's the nice part about it, though, because it's kind of a low, and that's why I picked it to be like my very first, like, quote unquote open source contribution, is because it's a very low, you know, barrier to entry. You just have to understand regex and what you're looking for. In my specific case, I actually had an issue where I needed to parse information, and instead of just creating my own parser and just leaving it on like my local PC, I wanted to contribute back to the project. So yeah, anyways, I say that just to, under the hood, it's always regex. Hey Ganesh, how are you? Glad you were able to join. You said you just joined. We'll go through the recording. It's an interesting topic. Yeah, and we've had some interesting conversations, so glad you made it, Ganesh. I mentioned in the very beginning, and since I'm live now, I'll just mention it to you, that tonight will be the last Road to DevNet Expert stream for a Thursday night specifically. I plan to do one more stream, with my exam being less than a month away. I plan to do one more stream, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. What did I say, the 16th or something like that, April 16th. And we're going to do like a really big stream, like hopefully probably like 4 hours, realistically 4 or 5 hours. I'm basically going to create like a mega project to go through. It will incorporate a bunch of tools. It will incorporate a bunch of different topics and kind of be that like grand finale. And then that'll be it for the Road to DevNet Expert streams. I will be streaming afterwards. After the exam, I'm going to take a little time off, but I will be streaming on Thursday nights again. It just won't be the Road to DevNet Expert series that I've been doing for the past 4 months or so, 3-4 months. So, but I know you've been here a while, Ganesh. So I figured I would just tell you in person, quote unquote, live, versus you having to go through a recording and be like, oh man, that stinks. But don't worry, I'll be back for sure. Okay. That passed. Yeah, so it took about almost 2 minutes, and you can see how long these pipeline runs take. So, and what's next? Oh, yep. So now let's go back here. Boom. So because this is still on my branch, let me see. It should show as some stuff changed. There we go. Yeah, it changed. Ensure devices in sync is changed. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that doesn't make sense. This one does. Push config to device. Only core router 1 says changed, because remember when I made that change, it was in the NSO model definition. So NSO said, oh, there is a difference. Let me go ahead and push that change, right? And it was the description. Oh, it looks like, let's see. I was just catching up. There's a few. You guys all said hello. Is it Chaib? Thank you for telling me, for saying good luck on the exam. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for being on the stream and chatting with us. And Ganesh says all the best for your exam. Thank you, Ganesh. Yeah, you guys will definitely know. Trust me, good or bad. It'll be on Twitter, right? That's like the one part about learning in public and doing these streams is, you see the good, bad, and the ugly. So, I'll definitely let everyone know, results and how everything goes, the whole experience. Because remember, I think I mentioned this before, but this will be my first expert level exam attempt. So like the whole traveling to the lab and going, the lab environment, every piece of it will be new. So not just the DevNet expert piece, but the whole experience. It'll be something cool. So, all right. So we have the test branch done. Oh yeah, change the description or the commit. Check out the commits. That's what I was going to do next. Let's see, commits. So we'll go to our branch, and you'll see I changed the latest commit was the change description, and you can see we changed it from L3 link to DevNet Dan was here. More informational than what this could ever be. So, so now if we're like, we made our config change right in the model, which then obviously got pushed out to the device, and our pipeline passed, which it did. And just to prove it to you, we'll go back to here, and we'll go to here, and I could dive into the pipelines tab, but you can see this green check. The latest pipeline is passed. So now it's time to move these into production. And you can do this multiple ways. You can do it through GitLab itself and just say, hey, move this branch, merge this branch into this branch. But we're going to use it, we're going to merge locally in our local repository, and then we're going to push those changes to GitLab. So you'll see here, we're going to merge test branch into master. So we got to check out master. So let's see. Git branch, let's make sure. Okay. So git checkout master. So now you'll see I'm now a master branch. And we're going to do a git merge. Okay. For some reason I blinked out there. Yeah. Git merge and then config change. So what we're doing is on the destination branch, right, our master branch, we're on it and we're saying, okay, well, merge this branch into the branch that I'm on. So we're doing a git merge config change. And everything we've done, when they compared the branches, when Git compared the branches, it only found that one, that description change, right? Because remember, we purposely created a faulty change and then reverted back. So you can see here, right, in this vars core router 1 YAML file, we have we removed a line and we added a line. That's it. All right, so now that we are on the quote unquote the newest master branch, we're gonna be able to push we're gonna push our local master branch to GitLab. And what that will do is it will kick off the one job that master branch that is allowed to run on the master branch, which is deploying to prod. So remember, we configured the test network, and then we did the ping connectivity, the PyTS ping connectivity tests, which that's a mouthful, but you get what I'm saying, right? So we verified that the change works in test, and we verified that that we're able to ping every device after our configuration was done. So then we merge those changes, that branch, into master, which then the only thing it does is it really should, and I know they're doing it just for the learning lab piece, but really should run through all those tests again, like deploying to test, deploying to, or doing your ping connectivity test and then deploying to prod. But in our case, we're just deploying to prod whenever master branch is changed. And you can see here, this is, like I said, this is Ansible interacting with NSO. And you see the play recap for OK changed equals 1. And you could see, not push config. Where's it at? It's here somewhere. They'll say okay. It's no, that's debug. Anyways, it's here. I promise you. Let's see. Because these all say changed, but it's because it's verifying, it's syncing with the devices. So technically it's changed, but and Ansible saying whether something changed or is okay is completely up to what the module states and how it's configured. But bottom line, somewhere in these almost 1450 lines of output, that there is a changed device, and as you guys know, it's the description. So that's about it with that. And yeah, examine the pipeline results. We did that. Everything passed. We configured to prod, and then blah blah blah, the conclusion. So yeah, and actually, just to prove that it changed and everything looks good, we'll go back to the project overview. On the master branch, we'll go to vars, and we'll go to router 1, and you'll see right here, DevNet Dan was here. So this is now in my master branch, which is the golden standard per se, and what reflects production. And so, and all of that was done using a CI/CD pipeline, right? We pushed the changes to a test network, verified that we can ping all the devices after that push, and then we, whenever any changes get pushed to master, that then gets all those changes or any difference gets pushed to our production network and validated that way. So, but I guess any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up? And I don't know how the stream might be like 20 seconds behind. So I'll see you, Blues. Thanks for sticking around. I guess while I wait for the stream to catch up, or if you guys have questions, I'll quickly go over the PyATS job. Because remember, as I mentioned, like we're touching a lot of tools here. We have Ansible, NSO, PyATS, and a little bit of GitLab, CI/CD, right? So you have to understand all pieces of it, which reflect the DevNet expert exam topics to a T. And so here's the PyATS job. It basically, you have to be familiar with PyATS, and I'm not going to go over all this, but you connect all the devices, you loop through this ping test case using these devices here, these device host names found in the test bed. And you can see here, it's pretty simple. Current device.ping to the destination. And the destination is found in a YAML file, which we didn't go over, but it's basically a variable file. And you loop through this, and then the common cleanup here then disconnects from the device.disconnect. And you see it they added some arguments when running this file directly. So, but yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward and kind of touches on everything. Nick asked, is that on your personal lab or DevNet sandbox? So this GitLab and everything we just did is on the DevNet sandbox. Because you can see here 10.10.20.50 is actually the dev box. So this box here, and I think, yeah. So you can see the Docker containers running. You can see GitLab runner. So we actually, on this developer box, this dev box that's in the sandbox, has GitLab runner and the GitLab CE, which is community edition, which is that self-hosted GitLab environment. And then the GitLab Vault as well, which gets installed with them. So yeah, to answer your question, it's all in this sandbox. Nick asked, have you written a lab guide for yourself already for the Saturday stream? No, I have not. That's ultimately why I'm not doing it this Saturday, and I'm pushing it out a week to do it on the 16th. I plan to maybe this weekend write it out. And really the purpose of it isn't going to be, the purpose of it will be to touch on as many tools as we can that make sense, right? So I'm not going to bounce between, actually, I'm not going to put limits on myself. I don't really know. But to answer your question, no, I haven't written it yet. That is TBD. I have an idea, but I just haven't wrote it out. And I'm going to write it out so that way whenever I post it, I'll post it along with the specific times with the stream, because I know this specific time frame, 8 p.m. Eastern on a Thursday night, a lot of people can't attend due to time zone constraints. So whether it be West Coast, just getting off of work, or especially over in Europe, there's a lot of people that it's just I think who commented, someone. I don't know. There's a lot of people that always are like, man, I wish I could catch your live stream, but it's like 1 a.m. my time by the time you start. So that's the big reason I'm trying to start. I'm doing at least one Saturday stream. One, it being a longer stream, and two, allowing more people that maybe aren't able to catch the Thursday night streams. So, but yeah, Nick, if you have any thoughts about it, feel free to let me know. Nick, or anyone watching the stream. If you're watching the VOD afterwards, the recording, feel free to message me on Twitter or say, hey, I saw your stream and I would think this would be pretty cool to see. Obviously, it has to relate to the DevNet Expert Lab. But yeah, I'm really just trying to to test my skills with a few different tools. Kind of like tonight. I know I went through a DevNet learning lab, but you can see, as long as you know PyTS library and some of its basic components, you can use PyTS. If you understand Ansible has an NSO module, you can use Ansible with NSO, and everything in between. So, Chaib, I think that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. Chaib says, thank you for everything you're doing. Just the channel I was looking for. Me, UK, need to sleep. Yeah, I apologize. I meant I want to do more weekend streams, and I've wanted to do them throughout this whole DevNet expert journey. It's just whenever you're studying on the weekend, it's tough because you're trying to stay focused. Like during these streams, I enjoy explaining things and like taking questions, but whenever like I'm in the zone, I want to stay in the zone. So like doing normal weekend streams would eat up a lot of my that focus study time. Nick asks, what hours will you do it? I may or may not already have an engagement if in the morning on the Discord, the Dev Core Study guide. Yeah, I was initially thinking the morning on Eastern time zone, so like 9 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Eastern start time. And I know that's when you guys have that. We have that the Dev Core Study group. But if I figure if I start later in the day, it kind of also kills it for people outside the time zone as well, like anyone in Europe or any time zones ahead. So I wanted to start kind of like morning and kind of go through mid-morning to early afternoon, so that way like it's that little clutch. I don't know. We'll see. I might put a poll or something on Twitter here in the next week or so to say, like, would you like to see it between 9 and 1, 12 and 5? I think those will be like the only two choices, because I don't want to do anything like Saturday night Eastern time zone. So, yeah, I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure out that. I just know I want to do a Saturday stream. I'm gonna do my best to keep a decent agenda and like a lab guide, and then also allow people to kind of come in, ask questions and whatnot. Because like I said, at the end of the day, to be honest, like I'm really happy with what we've built here. And some of you that have been in the chat for a while or just watching that aren't participating in the chat, I appreciate everyone that watches these videos and streams. I think we've built something really cool here, and I hope everyone kind of takes away that we all go through the same like struggles. Whether you choose to put it out in public or not, totally your decision. I chose to put it out because I feel like there isn't enough of kind of like that learning in public, at least in this live stream format. With a specific goal in mind, I should say, around network automation. I know Dimitri does a really cool stream on Sundays every so often. If you're not subscribed to him, I think he's streaming on Twitch. I just want to keep this more, the more it's out there, the more I think it will help others. And especially if it's on YouTube as a recording, people can watch it. So. If Roger that, I'll look out for it. All right, cool. Yeah. So we'll see. Like I said, we'll kind of play it by ear with, I definitely plan to stream that day, Saturday, and I'll try to put a poll out there to see who wants to join in the fun of network automation and all the different topics. So. Cool. Well, I don't have anything else. This is pretty much it. This is the final result. I mean, we have all these different pipelines that configure a test network, run ping tests, configure a prod network. I mean, there's so much in just this alone. I hope everyone, and if you're interested in this lab, NSO in a CI/CD pipeline. I'll toss it in the chat real quick as well. Actually, I guess I'll put the link. I don't know why I thought putting that in there would be a good idea. Just the name of the link. Yeah, so there's the link to the lab. If you're interested, if you feel like, okay, this is all kind of making sense to me, that's a link, and I highly recommend just reserving the NSO. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, I guess it logged me out. But the NSO reservable sandbox, it's just easier. So, but anyways, I appreciate everyone that's kind of been on this journey with me. I think I've already said it enough. This will be the last Road to DevNet Expert Thursday night streams. The next Road to DevNet Expert will be on Saturday. Let me pull it up. I want to say the 16th. Yes. Saturday, April 16th. Time is TBD. I'm looking at the morning or early afternoon for a start time. Poll will be out there on Twitter. Yeah, and we're almost there. What does my calendar say? 26 days, and I'll be taking my first attempt at the DevNet Expert, and I will be reporting back, pass or fail. But thanks again for sticking around, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at DevNetDan. You can message me, you can DM me, however you want to contact me. I'm always out there, willing to help. So thanks again for watching the stream, and I will talk to you all next time. See ya.
Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays.